Get into that first topic now, though. Should it be harder to claim jobless benefits? A record 6.5 million people are now on some form of them. We're going to look at the three main forms of support for people out of work. ESA, Employment and Support Allowance, used to be called incapacity benefit. That's for people who cannot work, and that's typically because of illness or disability. Jobseekers Allowance, which supports people while they look for a job or further work, JSA we're going to call that, and Universal Credit, or UC, which is a means-tested benefit to help with living costs. Now, Labour said from the beginning, during the election, it wants to get people back to work, but the measures that it's bringing in, or trying to bring in, do look a little bit more carrot than stick. Labour's promising a new national jobs and careers service to help people back into work. Then you've got locally based health and skills support to get more people with health conditions and disabilities into work. And then for our young people, a youth guarantee, work or apprenticeships for anyone aged between 18 and 21. Since they won the election, though, 500,000 people more are claiming benefits. So, Radzi, it looks like that softly approach, Labour's approach, isn't working at the moment.
For me, the initial thing, though, is that when we talk about benefits recipients, there's that stigmatisation. And growing up, my mum was on working parents' tax benefits under Gordon Brown. She was a single mother of 2 children, and I spoke to her about it, and I said, what would you have done without those benefits? And she said, the short answer is, struggled big time. I don't know what we would have done. My mum was a full-time NHS worker at the time in mental health, and yet she would be one of those statistics where you look at and say, look at all these people claiming benefits, they don't necessarily deserve it, how can we prove that she really needed it? So for me, I think we need to take the base out of what the benefit is, and if you receive it, it's probably because life isn't great right now. And my other question would be, if we are going to reduce the amount of benefits that we give away, where do we start?
But the stigma clearly isn't working, particularly for young people, more of whom are claiming benefits now. So that idea of being ashamed not to be in work, you know, is part of the answer, that people aren't feeling that shame. They haven't got that work ethic.
That's a really fair point, but I think when why is the headline of significance? Because the response will be, oh, it's people once again feckless, shameless, workless, lazy, and to me, that's fundamentally wrong. I
mean, the reality is that the vast majority of people, or a big chunk of the people who receive benefits, are working, Carole. So that stigma actually doesn't apply.
Well, that's not true, because 6.5 million are on jobless benefits. So they don't have a job, and there's no requirement for them to have one. We've got nearly 9 million people not working with no requirement for them to work. You know, 15% of the population are on jobless benefits. 51% of families in this country are on some kind of state benefit. What I find astonishing, there was a very interesting story last week. Department of Work and Pensions, Mole, did a story saying that it's out of control. He said it's like a gravy train. And he was saying that even claims they know to be fraudulent are being just waved through. And he was saying that you go on, you know, people can apply and keep reapplying. And if you keep reapplying 6 or 7 times, it's not held against you, and eventually you get it.
But those criteria are strict, aren't they?
No, they're not strict.
When they apply, what can they change and stay truthful to then receive benefits they wouldn't have received first time
someone
round?
is truly sick when you never see them face to face?
Because you have a fit note.
No.
You have a doctor.
Yes, you have you have a fit note, and we know
that's saying I know this person because I am their GP, and I can say that they are not in a position to work right now.
I don't believe that applies to 6.5 million people that are not fit to work. And we know that once you get that sick note, that means you can actually sit on benefits for the rest of your life and have a very quiet life. You know, I was on TikTok the other day and I saw 2 videos from people, one particularly from a woman which enraged me. And she said, I don't think I've ever said thank you to all you people who are working out there, because I'm allowed to claim benefits. I don't have to do a damn thing. I can just do what I like.
But there are
there are so many people like that on benefits now, and I'm sorry.
Why? If you
During
choose
COVID,
one example from TikTok.
Okay, no, it's not just one example. I've given you quite a lot of stats and figures there, but in the round, I'm talking about when COVID happened, we stopped seeing people face to face to analyse them, to see if they were sick, to see if what they were saying is true. Now you do it on the phone. How can you possibly tell if someone is sick and deserves a benefit? You can't.
There are anomalous pillocks everywhere you look in any department, and that's obviously one example of it.
Yes.
So if we take, again, speaking about my mum, I said to her, she worked in CAMS, recently retired, so Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. I said, if I were going to try and claim benefits for incapacitation, what would be the process if it was, say, under depression? So, well, first we go to a GP, and the GP will medicate you, they'll diagnose you, and then based on that, we'll see if it works. So you come back maybe 4, 6, 8 weeks later. If it's worked, great. If it hasn't, we'll have to make another diagnosis again. It would all be medicinal. Then if that hasn't worked, a few months down the line, I may get to see a counsellor in my surgery. And if they can acutely diagnose me, they will then put me on the waiting list to see a therapist, where the wait, for example, in some West Midland areas, is up to 3 years.
Did you just hear what I said about the DWP Mo, the Department of Work and Pensions Mo, who said what you're describing is not the case. He said people are weighed through all of the time.
With the greatest respect, that my mum has recently retired.
So you're giving it one case. You're having a go at me for using one example about one person.
Well, that was me. That wasn't Radzi.
No, he did. He's using his mum as an example. There are not 6.5 million people like your mum who really needed it. There just aren't.
Well, I think we're mixing examples here, because I use my mum as the example of in 2010 being under working parents' tax benefits. I'm now using the example of my mum working in mental health, explaining to me the system for millions of people.
I do wonder whether we have experienced a cultural shift since 2010, and I wonder what that is. And we talked about COVID being part of it, but also what that has resulted in is a mental health crisis in young people. And if we start to call them feckless and work shy, we could be in for a terrible harvest.
Most countries in the world have recovered from COVID. We appear to be one of the only countries that hasn't recovered from COVID and is using it they're using it as every excuse under the sun not to work. Most other countries have just got on now and got over it. We cannot use a virus that attacked people however many years ago, 5, 6 years ago, as a reason to not work now, because what's going to happen is this country is going to crash and burn. You can't have 15% of your population on jobless benefits, because it is not the case that 15% of people are sick.
Radzi, you're deeply in touch with young people because of the work that you've done on television. You know what it's like out there. Do you sense that this is a work ethic problem, or do you sense that young people are genuinely going through dire times?
I think some young people are going through dire times, but I also think there's a fundamental issue with the social contract, that now young people know that they can work very hard in a decent job and won't necessarily own a house. They can't afford to go on holiday and all these things. When you speak to recent graduates, for example, they're not sure what their future looks like. Life is really hard out there, and it's fine.
With every kid, with everyone who's 20, who comes out of university.
Precisely.
And why do you think it's your human right to own a house? Why? It's not a right in other countries. People in other countries don't own houses. Why is it your human right to own a house?
OK.
It isn't.
I want to take some calls anyway. John's in Tyne and Wear. John, should we make it harder for people to claim benefits in this country when they're out of work?
No, definitely not.
Tell me about your experience. Have you been out of work? Have you claimed benefits?
I'm currently out of work. I've worked for the last 28 years for the NHS, and I've got a chronic condition. I was diagnosed back in 2019 and still working. And at the end of last year, I ended up being off sick and haven't been back to work since. I left work because of ill health in March, and been seeing counsellors. I'm waiting on MRIs. I'm under the pain clinic, all the rest of it. And I was advised to try and claim benefit. I, in March, started the process, and I've had so many hoops to jump through and had no money since then, and have only just been paid 2 weeks ago, and my partner's had to basically keep me. I've had to borrow money so I could pay for dental fees, and it's just... it's when you've worked all that time. I worked through COVID without a day off, and then when you're trying to get some help, you don't get anything.
OK, so, John, presumably you've been backed up with, like, cast iron diagnoses from your doctor, the sort of things that demonstrate clearly that you are unable to work at the moment.
Yeah, I've had to produce all my sick notes. Like I say, I'm currently having counselling. I'm on waiting list for an MRI, all the rest of it, and you just don't get any help. I've filled in the forms. I've had to chase them up. You get told, oh, there's a long waiting list, there's a long queue, so you have to just wait. And I think it's already difficult enough. And at the time, like I say, I haven't worked for the last 28 years. The forms are so complicated, I had to try and get help to fill in these forms. And I just don't think you should make it harder for genuine people that need to access benefits when they're out of work, especially when you paid into the system for the last 28 years.
OK, Carole, how do you answer John there? Because John is giving you a cast-iron example of somebody who is entitled. Not only has he got the evidence he needs, but he has paid into the system. And you say, you make it any harder for me, we could go under as a family.
I think he's being incredible. Look, John, it'll distress you to know that last year, foreign fraudsters managed to claim 50 million quid out of the benefit system. They don't even live in this country, and they filled in forms and got benefits.
What's that got to do with John's situation?
Well, what do you want me to do? John, can I ask you, you don't have to tell me, what was wrong with you? What were you diagnosed with?
I ended up having a car crash back in 2019. It was quite serious. I was off work for 6 months, and then I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic pain, which I'm still, like I say, being diagnosed with, and I'm waiting on my MRI scan and other conditions.
So what, you've been waiting on an MRI scan for 6 years?
No, I haven't. I've tried to work through it, dealing with it, and being on different painkiller medication, and literally last year, I couldn't work through the pain any longer. So I've been going to the GP, going for physio, going through everything you've got to do before you can be referred. So I actually have an appointment in 3 weeks' time for my MRI.
Would you want to make it harder for John to access the money he needs to carry on his family life?
If John, no, of course I do. Why would you ask me that question? Of course I do. I'm talking about the people who are scamming, and to pretend people aren't scamming the system is lunacy. Of course they are. Thatcher did this back in, Thatcher tried to massage the unemployment figures back in the 80s by shunting unemployed onto sickness, because if you're unemployed, there's an expectation you should work. If you're on sick, it's a moral outrage to expect those people to work who are on the sick. So that's the difference I'm trying to say. That the figures are being massaged. So 6.5 million people cannot be in John's position. I just don't believe they are.
But I'm really grateful to John for telling us his story, because it's important for us to know that people like John are in that situation. He's given to a system, to the NHS, and now he needs something back from it.
Well, listen, John, I hope you manage to get back to work, that your pain and your suffering's put to one side, and you can get back to what you clearly love doing. Let's take another call. Richard's in Edinburgh. Richard, do you think we should make it harder for people to access out-of-work benefits?
Hi, we meet again. So, first of all, I'm in Carole's camp, totally. I think that there are far too many people taking far too many excuses, advantages with regards to benefit claims, which is why this country's in trouble.
OK, what do you think is the main excuse people are coming forward with to claim benefits?
Very simple. No, it's mental health benefits and stuff like that. I don't believe that people have mental health issues. I do know somebody who, unfortunately, is no longer with us, who had a very, very serious bipolar problem. That is what I call mental health. OK, so that needs
a mental health diagnosis. You need a professional to look at someone, assess them, and say, you have bipolar disorder, therefore you are in no position to work.
I would agree with that, because this guy probably...
What's different? The difference between that and any other mental health diagnosis?
People are using it as a massive excuse, and I just think it's gone too far.
We know Richard is right. People are being signed off work with anxiety. Everyone gets anxious. It's not a mental health issue. You're anxious. We all get anxious. That's
unfair, Carole, because
Why is it unfair?
Because you're not a mental health expert, and you're just homogenising an entire experience of anxiety as we all have anxiety.
So you think if you're anxious, you should not work? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's a difference between experiencing anxiousness and having anxiety. and that does a disservice to entire mentally ill population around the country.
So what do you think is the bad one? What are you saying? And you're not a mental health expert either, but what are you saying is the bad one?
What do you mean the bad one?
Well, the one that would allow people to be off work.
Having anxiety.
Having anxiety means that you shouldn't work. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Everyone has anxiety. Everyone, every day. You weren't a bit anxious coming on here today?
Response. That is a mesmerising response.
No, it's not mesmerising. What do you mean? How patronising? What do you mean mesmerising?
It's patronising because it's coming from a place of total ignorance. If you just told me you're not an expert in mental health...
Neither are you. Are you?
But I know what I don't know.
What
I don't know is mental health.
Ramsey, do we need to
like
redefine these terms to help somebody like Carole tell the difference between debilitating anxiety, which means you cannot get up in the morning because of the fear you have of the outside world, and the stress that we all naturally experience from day to day? Because I think a lot of people would say, I can't tell the difference.
Instead of letting Radzi answer that question, let me answer it, because I had a nervous breakdown. I suffered from real depression that needed medication for a year. And I still went to work. It nearly killed me. What you've just described, getting out of bed in the morning, trying to make myself go to work, trying to look okay to work. So don't tell me I don't have experience of mental health.
Listen to what you said, real depression, and it almost killed you. So what you're suggesting
I went to work though, Radzi.
But that's the point.
I never claimed a benefit.
It almost killed you. So your supposition is that we should all almost kill ourselves, and that's the solution.
I was never actually going to kill myself. I had the feelings of that because that's what goes with depression. But please don't say to me I have no experience of mental health, because I do. But still, I didn't feel it was a good enough reason to never work again. What I felt was I had to get myself better to go back to work.
You don't feel like we should live in a supportive society that allows you to
get
better?
Supported.
A supportive society where the state helps you.
I didn't want help from the state.
To get better in your own time.
The state can't get me better from a depression. I had to get myself better from a depression with the aid of some medication. I had to get myself better. The
How
state
did you know what
can't help
medication
me.
to take?
Sorry?
How do you know what medication to take?
Well, because I saw a doctor. Are you being insane?
But you just said you didn't want help from the state. What's the doctor?
Well, I didn't get help from the state. What are you talking about?
What's the doctor then?
Listen, we are going to have to move on.
Well, you're being very silly and very I'm not letting them get away with that, because you are now deriding my problem.
I'm not deriding anything
Yes, you are. How dare you?
You said you have no experience.
Matt was talking about help.
I was referring to your lack of experience.
We do have to draw a line under.
Well, I do have mental health.
But you're not a mental health expert.
We're going to have to move on. All I can say is,
two very different things.
Carole, I'm glad you recovered. I'm glad you're with us now.
So am I.
And I hope everybody
I hope
everybody has the resilience that you clearly have. Thank you all for your calls on that.